Hello, everyone. Megan here from Romance by the Book with the lovely Marielle.
So
And our October special guest is Liana De la Rosa. Thank you for being here.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
We read Ana Maria and the Fox for our October book, and we loved it so much. And we're so excited to
Yay.
talk to you about it.
Yeah. Well, I'm excited to talk about it too, especially with two people who, enjoyed it. You're never guaranteed.
Yeah,
we did. We had a lot of fun reading
so
it.
fun.
I guess one of the things that was interesting about this book too is because it's London, but we were talking, I guess, before the
Mhm.
before the cameras went on that it's London, so it's a kind of a familiar setting, but it's truly like a fish out of water. Like our heroine is she's not from there. And our hero is, but also isn't.
Mhm.
So we have like really a different point of view from both sides of a place that's like pretty familiar, I think,
Mhm.
to romance readers. Was that a thing that you have been wanting to do? Because I feel like your other books are very like they're set in a similar setting, but with people who are like, they're from there. So
Exactly. I yes, I did it purposely. And frankly, I did it because I had been wanting to write something different for a while. And nothing was sticking or nothing was selling. I mentioned I wrote that Victorian mountain climber series that I was so passionate about that didn't go anywhere and died on submission. And I was really bummed about it. And my agent was like, well, let's start brainstorming stuff that you could write. And she recommended that I write like a historical romp. And I told her, I don't want to write a romp. I don't think I'm a rompy writer. Like, I don't have like that light, flirty, kind of writing style. And I felt like if I tried to do that, that it would kind of fall flat. And she was like, well, obviously, we want you to do things that you're interested in and do it in your own way. So, how could you make this your own? And I had no idea. And I was working on a novella at the time, and the hero in the novella, I knew that he was half Latino, but I didn't know where. So I was doing research for like immigration records. And I came across like records of like Mexicans immigrating to Europe. And it got me thinking about what was kind of happening in history at that time. And I remembered the French occupation. And like suddenly I was like, oh my gosh, I could set a story in London where readers are familiar with, right? We know the rules of, or we think we do, right? Of
Right.
Victorian or Regency society. But my characters could be like me, and they could have my cultural heritage. I could play with history that's different, but introduce it in a way that would feel, I guess, easier to understand because the setting is, as we said, familiar. And so I want to say within like that day, I had the whole series arc kind of sketched out. I knew who the sisters were. I knew everything about it. And I was really excited, and I shared it with my agent, and she goes, yes, yes, this will absolutely work because it's like we said, it's will give readers what they're used to, right? But
yeah, but it
also
is your entry point into a
exactly,
story. Yeah.
exactly. And it provided me a chance to play with history that I found very fascinating and that was very different than kind of the Eurocentric lens that tends to appear within most historical romances. Obviously, not all, but
Mhm.
a lot of them. And I was really excited about like, okay, well, what can I include? What must I leave out? And I'm the kind of writer that my first drafts are very heavy on the historical details because I learned all this stuff and I have to share it with somebody, even if it's just my editor. And then she's like, this is great and very interesting, which she's always so nice to me, like, oh, this is so fascinating, but we're probably going to have to take it out. And I'm like, I get it. And I understand, like, I don't have a problem with that. I have to tell her first and then we can start cutting. But it kind of reinvigorated me and rekindled that excitement I felt for writing, and specifically for writing historical romance. Because while I didn't want to write that romp, I was able to find a happy medium where I could write something that I was passionate about, but also that was marketable in a trad publisher's eyes, right? Because in indie spaces, you can pretty much write whatever you want. And I love that. But if you want to sell to a trad publisher, you got to play the game. So I had hoped that this series, The Luna Sisters, would do that. And thankfully it did. It actually sold really quickly. So I was very lucky. Yeah.
That actually answers one of my questions I had, which was if you had this story percolating for a while before you were able to write it. So it sounds like you were able to write it right away, which is awesome.
Yeah, it came about kind of quickly. And I actually sold on proposal. So I hadn't written the whole book. I just knew kind of what was going to happen. And I had like 3 chapters and it sold. And so then I had to write it. But I also benefited, I believe, from the Bridgerton bump, because it sold in April 2021 and or actually March 2021. And Bridgerton came out like that December 2020. So I think the publishers were looking for something diverse, something again familiar but diverse. And so I benefited from that bump for sure.
I've heard of people before saying that like a book just like poured out of them, or that it just like came to them fully formed, or the character came fully formed. And I am always curious like how that works or how that feels, because it feels like a lie. It feels like magic.
Yeah.
but
I've never had
hearing
that
you
happen.
talk about this book, I'm like, it sounds like it kind of poofed in your head pretty quickly, which is fun.
So I'm really great about, well, not really great, but I tend to come up with ideas and really like not easily, but I enjoy that part of the process. I'm one of those people that enjoys writing synopses because I like to kind of take the idea that's only been in my head and put it down on paper for the first time. But actually writing the book is awful. I hate it. I really do. I do not like drafting at all. I like to have drafted. I like to be done. And then I really love revisions because I've already, as they say, put like the sand in the sandbox, and now I can build sandcastles with it. And that's the fun part for me. So I'm kind of a character writer. So I can plan out and write all these synopses of how I think my characters are going to behave and how they're going to, approach different things. Until I start writing them, I really don't know. For instance, with Gideon, who is the male main character in Ana María and the Fox, I struggled with him a lot. And I think as like uptight as he is, he felt uptight to me writing him. And I felt like everything I tried to like make happen felt so awkward with him doing it because it didn't suit who he was as a person. And that's why like they had to be forced into marriage because he was just too honorable. Like I could not get him to kiss her any sooner than I did. I couldn't get these things to happen because it just didn't feel like something he would do. Something, he was this self-made man who built himself up, who like walked the straight and narrow because he knew he had so much to lose if he didn't. And he would never like dilly-dally with like a woman who had a fiance. Like he wouldn't dream of doing that. And he was already angry enough with himself for like being so infatuated with Ana María. So for him to actually like act upon that, it just felt so unrealistic when I wrote it. And I was getting really frustrated with him, like, give me something to work with. Like, this is so hard. And Ana María was so much easier because I related to her so much more as an eldest daughter myself. I kind of could like sympathize with her in a lot of instances. And whenever I wrote a scene with her and Gideon, it took a while. It was I would leave it for like a day and I'd come back and I'm like, okay, I can do this. And then it would just like not come out. So those people who say they like it poured out of them, no. I may have been really excited about this idea and, was anxious to share it, but like actually writing it was painful.
I have to say though, I laughed out loud when Gideon like smiled at the opera and it ended up in the newspaper because
His secretary was hilarious. I loved those moments between him and the secretary where he's like reading him the article. It was so great.
Oh, good. I'm so glad. Yeah. I knew that he would be upset about that. Like he would just, how dare I have a reputation to keep up. And I especially like that the Duke had always been trying to get him to smile and never was able to. So he was like offended that Gideon had smiled at someone else. Like, how dare you? So
it was fun.
We're like, am I not entertaining?
And the only reason Whitfield even cared is because he was so like, somber and wouldn't smile. So then of course he had to try, but yeah. Well, maybe one day I'll have a book like that where I can just sit down and it all flows out of me. I doubt it though.
Dream.
Yeah.
That's funny. I feel like that. And then also but you've said a couple times that not a couple times, but you said about the rompiness. And I'm like, this book wasn't a romp, but there were moments like them riding the carriage, like speeding through town and just like cackling and Gideon is like, oh, I know who that is.
Yeah,
so
like pure laugh.
That were definitely like fun and romp adjacent, I guess.
That's good because I do want to include some of that, right? Like I try to like write lighthearted things and they just don't turn out that way. I'm just not that kind of writer, and that's okay.
I'm the opposite.
I've
always
embraced.
like, I'm gonna write a dark hero, and then he's just like a little awkward. It's not. It never. So I can sympathize in the opposite direction.
I always try to write like Oh, I'm sorry.
No, I'm sorry. I was just saying it was perfect too because a lot of the rompy stuff was like between the sisters, which makes so much sense because Gideon is not a rompy kind of dude. So that would not have worked.
Exactly. Yeah.
He's just on the sidelines having to like rescue them.
Yeah. And those rompy scenes between the sisters were so important because they were trying to establish a relationship with each other. And so I felt like it was important to show that. And I have a sister. We're ridiculous when we're with each other. My mom is one of 5 sisters. They're ridiculous when they're with each other. When you mentioned Ana Maria's laugh and Gideon hearing it, I literally, when I wrote that scene, I thought of one of my tias who has like this cackle that like you would hear from the other side of like the park. You'd be like, oh, there's my Nina Mary over there. So I'm glad that you picked up on that. Like the sister scenes needed to kind of have that lighthearted teasing, that sort of stuff, because so much of their childhood had been, under the watchful eye of their father. And so they hadn't been able to like form those bonds. And I wanted them to have the chance to just laugh with each other.
That was really cool. And I liked, I feel like a lot of times in a romance, especially, the side characters are so side. Like sometimes you're just like uber focused on the main couple, which works and doesn't work to varying degrees depending on the situation. But like having the sisters there and be such important characters, not just for their own books later, but because of how they relate to Ana Maria and how she relates to them and how that they reel her in sometimes. Like she's super into Gideon and Isabel's like, ma'am, you are engaged.
Yeah.
What are you doing? And I just really appreciated their relationship and how hard they worked to have a relationship against everything that their father had obviously tried to do to them their whole life. So that was really great. I loved that.
I'm so glad because I was kind of worried when I turned in the book that the sister storyline would need to be cut. Because obviously it's romance, so the central romantic plot is supposed to be key. And I felt like in a lot of ways, the sisters' developing relationship was just as important. And I wrote it specifically to be like a major sort of relationship development in the story at the same time. And thankfully, my editor agreed and like didn't cut it. And I will say that in the next two books, Isabel's book and Gabby's book, the sisterly relationship is there. Like it's obviously a huge part of who they are, but that's because I laid the groundwork for it in book one. So in books 2 and 3, it's not like a central focus of the story because they've already done that work. They're just now friends, so they can, you know, interact with each other in a much more comfortable way. But I know that some people didn't like, they wanted more time with Ana Maria and Gideon and maybe less time with the sisters. And I get that, I really do. But it was important for me to include that and to spend time with just the three of them. And I'm glad I did, because some of my favorite scenes in the book are just the three sisters with each other. And I think that it really informs each of their characters and like what motivates them. And frankly, I hope it makes readers excited for the sisters' books because they've spent this time with them and they've seen them grow. I know that it made me excited to write their stories, even though I already knew like what was going to happen. Like I was excited to spend time with them. And I mentioned that I'm like a character writer. Like I like to get into my characters' heads. They still always surprise me. I am writing Gabby's book right now, and I thought certainly I would just slip into her, and she's sassy and opinionated and she knows what she wants. And oh my goodness, I didn't expect for her to spend the majority of the time on the page so vulnerable and like just masking it and like charging forward anyways. But like I'm in her head now, right? So I'm spending time with her while she's charging forward, and just like that center gooey heart of hers like completely caught me off guard. And I think it's made it challenging to write because I want to get her right, because she deserves it, just like Isabel deserved it, and just like Ana Maria deserved it. And I think too, talking back to Ana Maria, she's the eldest sister, so her relationship with her younger siblings was key to her story, to who she was as a person. Like she cared about them and was protective of them, and it was important for her to have relationships with her sisters. And Isabel and Gabby, they love their sisters, but they're different people, right? They you know, they're not,
They don't have that burden of being the eldest. Yeah.
exactly. So it's been really fun to play with. It's been a fun dynamic, and I'm glad that at least for what I've seen, readers have enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Which I'm
Yeah,
glad.
I think that when you're writing a new series, like usually the beginning of a series, and especially when you're going into kind of a new world, it's
Mhm.
it always feels a little bit like a tightrope, because you need to understand the world that you're going into. And in your case with the sisters, like a lot of times in my experience when I'm reading like a friend group or a family unit, or they're already like
Mhm.
formed and
Already
together and
bonded.
bonded. And in this case, you had sisters who were like sisters, but kind of
Yes.
strangers. And so there was like the development, like you said, what had to happen of like both their relationship. And then the love interest comes in, and they, you know, all of that. I
Mhm.
feel like that was a lot to take on, like weaving all of those things together, but I super
Yeah.
enjoyed it.
And I
Um,
know, oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
no, go ahead.
I was just going to say, and I know, like you mentioned about the first book in a series, how it's setting up the world. And I think introducing the history of the time, um, what sort of dynamics, historical dynamics would be taking part in this book, in this series, obviously were introduced in Ana Maria and the Fox. And so too, Gideon was a politician, and Ana Maria was already interested in stuff like this. So all those sort of things were going to be crucial to their story because that was important to them. Whereas in Isabel's story, like the politics of it, like aren't as big of a deal because she is. So I don't want to give her story away, but she is, but it to a different extent, right? Than a
He has
member
a
of
different role to play than
Yeah.
exactly. And
yeah.
same with Gabby. So um I worked really hard to try to make that first book, or Ana Maria and the Fox, like not so, you know, to find a way to walk that line between sharing the historical details that needed to be shared that were crucial to the story, while also developing these relationships. But yeah, Gideon and Ana Maria both like their world wasn't just like their family or their romance. It was so much broader than that, with what they wanted to accomplish. And so I had to include it. And finding a way to like not make it overwhelming or not make it distracting from the romance was challenging. There's some days I'm like, oh yeah, I did that okay. And then other days I'm like, oh, I could have cut back on this aspect or whatever. But thankfully it's published. I don't have to worry about it too much. I can't go change it.
Is there something that you left out that you would like to tell us about because you really wish it was in there?
Oh, I had more interactions between Gideon and his friends, like the three men just kind of joking around with him because he's not really like someone who jokes around.
Yeah.
And I specifically, I think if you're one of my newsletter subscribers, I shared the scene on my newsletter. For those of you who are not, the wedding night scene was different in the earlier drafts. As it is in the book, he escorts her to her chamber and then stuff happens. In the earlier draft, Gideon escorts Ana Maria to her room, and then he kind of freaks out and he tells her goodnight and he leaves and he takes off and he goes down to the study where Whitfield and Dawson are like already drinking, talking or whatever. And they see him on the doorway in the door frame. And Whitfield says something to him like, oh, I was afraid this was going to happen. Come sit down and let me tell you what you're supposed to do. And of course, Gideon's like, shut up. And then they come and they're just like teasing him about why was he with them and not with his new wife and blah, 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 blah. And they're kind of giving him a pep talk about it. But it was so funny because it felt so needed for Gideon. Like he needed someone to be like, stop being so serious. Like, get out of your head. Just go kiss your wife. Yeah, exactly. And so I really enjoyed it and it made me laugh because it was also gave the Duke a chance to just be obnoxious. But my editor was like, no, I think we need to change this. It needs to, he needs to be more romantic. He can't leave her alone. And I was like, okay, like that makes sense. Like, so that's why it became what it did. But I have like lots of little scenes that maybe because I enjoy character work, like I enjoy exploring the story through my characters. So I like to write little, just little snippets and I cannot tell you how many times just pieces of dialogue or little interactions come to me throughout the day. And I have notes all over scrolled with that. 9 times out of 10, they don't make it into the book, but it's fun to do it anyways, because it kind of gets me in their head. So I do wish I could have shared more of basically more of Gideon being teased and harassed by his friends. That was a lot of fun.
Awesome.
I mean, I do think it was probably needed.
Yeah, he definitely, I loved Whitfield. He's so fun and I can't wait to see, things from his point of view later on, but he's a riot and I loved how much he just goads Gideon into things and like gives him a hard time and Gideon like thinks to himself like, I can't believe we're friends, this is so weird, but like he's so great, he can't help it.
Whitfield also like says that he's always like giving little nuggets of like a tragic backstory. Like he would say stuff.
He's so dramatic.
Like, wait a minute.
He's a Scorpio. I feel like he's just very dramatic and just very, yeah. And I'm writing him right now, and I will say, and I don't think this is giving anything away, because if you've read my books, you will probably see this. I cannot tell you how many times I try to write like a hero who's kind of keeps the heroine at bay and keeps his emotions all bottled up and all that stuff. No, I only know how to write simps who like fall so hard.
Love it.
I was gonna say, like, from the first in book 1, he's like, why is she so mean to me? Like must continue to.
I know.
Like, I must poke at her more.
They always fall first, like always. And I was thinking about that because I'm writing Whitfield right now. And I'm like, why do I always do this? And I was like, you know what? I like it. So maybe because I want men to like fall hard and fast and just be all encompassing and love their love interest, and
but not know what to do and mess it all up by giving her a hard time.
yeah. Yeah, he's like that quintessential schoolboy pulling her
Yeah.
braids, except Gabby will cut you. So.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, I'm pretty sure that Gabby just didn't give him the response he was expecting, and now
No,
he's
not at
like,
all.
Yeah, she's an Aries. She will.
"Hey, me too."
Well, okay. She's
So
a
she will
quintessential.
harass just
Amazing.
for the sake of it.
Yes.
So I love, you can see the little peak of the cover behind your head up on your mantle. And so I actually had a question about that. Did you get any kind of input in that cover? Because it's so beautiful and I want to know
Thank
all about it.
you. So, yes, short answer, yes. I had a very specific vision for what I wanted for the cover. I had like a Pinterest board. As soon as they were like, "Do you have any cover ideas?" And I was like, "Oh, prepare for my
Glad you
thesis about
asked.
this." Yes.
You were
And
like,
so,
"Here's the link."
yeah, for real. If I could have like sketched it out, I would have. But I knew I wanted them in a clinch because this is historical romance. And I knew that I wanted her wearing a magenta gown because she's wearing a magenta gown when she first meets Gideon in the book. And I mentioned that it would great be to have like the London skyline in the cover somewhere, and that I wanted it bright and vivid and like very cultural, essentially, is what I said. And I shared lots of pictures, that stuff I was thinking. And the cover artist, her name is Camila Gray, and she's Brazilian. And they shared the first sketch of it, and I was like, yes, that's it. It was perfect, like the pose, immediately perfect. The skyline, like I just loved it. And then they just made it as colorful and as bright as I hoped for. So yeah, they've been Berkeley, the art department has been incredibly receptive to my ideas. The same with book 2. I knew what I wanted. We had some back and forth with like the specific pose. But like everything else was like, I want this and I want that. And they gave it all to me. So yeah, hopefully I'll get to share that cover very soon. Like maybe by the time this airs.
Yeah, that'd be great.
That would be nice.
Yeah, I'm already thinking about like Gabby's cover, just
because you're writing them, so they're all up in your head right now.
I have some ideas. We'll see. That's a ways away. They don't come out till 2025.
I'm excited. Well, I was like, I'm excited for Gabby's book, but Isabel too, because I mean that sneaky girl. I feel like that's going to be fun to read.
Well,
whenever
and
she gets
we
up
got a
to.
sneak peek of her kind of dynamic with Dawson too, even just that small bit outside of the Darwin talk. And she says something and he seemed, like tail between his legs, like walked away. And Anna was like, that was mean. Like, why were you so mean to him? And she's like, whatever. Like, I'm like, I just loved it. I can't wait to see more of them.
Especially for Isabel to act like that, right? She's
Yeah.
so reserved and like kind of awkward in crowds. And so for her to be like so demonstrative in her distaste for someone.
Yeah. Do you show us like their first encounter with each other? Because
in their book, I will.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Because I was like, but
we actually talked about that. I can't remember if we talked about it on camera in one of our recaps, but we definitely chatted. And I was like, I really hope we see their first meeting because I feel like that's going to be really important. And like, I can't wait to see what happens.
Yeah.
And you can tell in Ana Maria's book, like the little interactions that they have, you can tell that like something happened. There was a first impression made. So
there was. There was a first impression made.
Yeah. I'm so nosy. I was like, I must know.
Yes.
Good. Yeah. It's all those they're answered pretty like soon in the book because that you have to like establish why they're
right.
It's more one-sided, her with animosity towards him, and he's just like, okay. So yeah.
And think what you want.
Yeah.
But she also, like, I don't know, even with her sister, she's like, oh, I got lost. And everyone's like, did you?
I kind of talk about this in the author's note of Isabel's book, but I I didn't always like Isabel when I was writing her, because she is like, you mentioned it earlier about how she was kind of Ana Maria's like that little angel on her shoulder, like, hey, why are you indulging this flirtation with Gideon when you have a fiance at home?
Mhm.
And she was like her loyalty sometimes felt kind of misplaced maybe. And I don't know, she very much felt like a Jan Brady character to me, right? In a lot of ways when I was like writing her. So I knew what her story would be while I was writing Ana Maria's book. And I figured, I'll worry about being in her head when I get there. And so when I started writing it, I loved being in her head. She really caught me by surprise. She is just, she can be awkward and shy and kind of timid on the inside, but she's like a lion inside. Like she wants so desperately to like, not necessarily stand out. She's not one to like want to be the center of attention, but she wants to be useful. She wants to feel like she's done something important. And she has like this huge heart, and I loved writing her. And maybe because I ended up falling in love with her as a character, I was determined that her love interest was going to be the biggest gooey simp for her. Not right away, but it did like happen because that's what she deserved. And so she, I don't know, I don't want to give away her story, but she kind of took me by surprise, and I have grown incredibly fond of her.
Hear that, because I remember when I first read that scene where she's telling Ana Maria, like, you have a fiance, like, what are you doing? And it was almost like she was like jealous. Like me, I thought at first I was like, does she like Ana Maria's fiance? Like, is that why she's seeming like she's defending him, or like what is going on? And then later
that comes
they
up.
talk about his lover and stuff like that. But yeah, and so I was like, this is so interesting. Like, I don't know what to think. And then later I think she says to her, like, I'm on your side. Like, she's basically like playing devil's advocate, which which made it make more sense. But yeah, at first I didn't know what to think about like why she was reacting that way.
And I think once you like read her book, you realize where she was coming from and like what kind of what more is at play that's motivating her. And you don't see Ana Maria and Gideon a whole lot in her book, but you see Gabby a lot. Gabby, because it's the two unmarried sisters who are with each other now. Like Ana Maria set up her own home, and she's helping, Gideon with his work. But yeah, I was pleasantly surprised writing her book, and I really hope readers enjoy her, because I feel very protective of her. And I know once I send her off into the world, I have no choice, but she was very special, and I really loved her.
Well, I love getting that peek at what's coming next, which is June, you said?
June 4th.
Yay.
2020.
I believe it's almost the end of the year already.
I know. Gosh. Where did 2023 go?
I don't know. Into the wind.
Yeah,
just like glittered away. Yeah.
I saw a thing that was, I guess it was on Instagram the other day. It was maybe some like snippet from Brooklyn Nine-Nine where what's that guy's Peralta, whatever, he's saying something about how it's May, and Gina is like, it's the end of October, and I was like, that's how I feel.
That's exactly how it feels, like just one long slide into like the end of the new year. Yeah.
Well, lots to look forward to in 2024. Definitely looking forward to, even sooner than that, seeing the cover, which is awesome.
Yeah.
I can't wait to see that.
And I can't wait to share it.
It's going to be exciting. So if you haven't yet, sign up for her newsletter, because I'm sure we might get a sneak peek first, maybe.
Yes. No, for sure.
Or
you
deleted scenes. Yes. Definitely worthwhile.
Yes.
Do you have other projects going on, or are you focused on the Luna Sisters right now? And then
I do have something I want to work on after I turn in Gabby's book, which will be on January 1st. I do hope to be able to work on the third Dalton novella. I've had a cover for like 2 years for that novella. Like I know it's plotted out, like I know what it is. I just haven't written it yet. And so I hope that I can take some time so I can write that and maybe put it out later in 2024. We'll see. But yeah, that's my immediate plan. And then obviously I will get started on some other stuff. But right now, that's the immediate plan.
Nice. Cool.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for doing this. This is really fun.
It was fun. Thanks for letting me chat with you.
You updated your website, but it's still Liana in Bloom, right? And then
I would go to lianadelarosa.com.
okay.
Liana in
And then
Bloom will take
Instagram
you. All my handles everywhere because I feel like I'm on almost every platform. I have to find a way to waste time. Is Liana in Bloom.
Okay.
So social media is Liana in Bloom and
Correct.
website
Is lianadelarosa.com. And you can sign up for my newsletter there.
Awesome. And when you're seeing this, it will be the final Saturday in October. Hopefully we'll have the cover by then. If not, hopefully it'll be shortly after that. And we'll see everybody in November.
Sounds great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, ladies. Bye.
Bye.